Right now, as you're sitting there watching this, there's a piece of ancient machinery quietly running in the background of your mind. It was installed long before you took your first breath, and honestly, it operates entirely without your permission. Just imagine a system so deeply embedded in your biology that it dictates your actions before you even realize you've made a choice. Well, that's exactly what we're looking at today. In this explainer, we're opening the files on the dark psychology and neuroscience of fear. We're going to expose exactly why you're wired to be afraid, and how this hidden programming controls your life in ways you've probably never even noticed.
Deep inside your temporal lobe sits the amygdala. It's tiny, roughly the size of an almond, but it wields this immense, almost dictatorial power over how you perceive reality. I mean, every single second of your life. While you're working, while you're scrolling on your phone, even while you sleep, this little almond-sized alarm system is relentlessly scanning every piece of sensory information you take in. It is desperately searching for danger. And here's the truly terrifying part. Your amygdala, it doesn't know the difference between a charging lion and a nasty comment on social media. It doesn't distinguish between a physical predator and a looming deadline at work. It really only knows one thing: threat. And when it finds that threat, whether it's real, imagined, or completely symbolic, it seizes total control of your entire mind. The sensory data hits your amygdala first, and bam! It pulls the emergency brake on your consciousness. Your rational brain, the part of you that uses logic and reason and language, it wasn't consulted in this process. It was completely overruled before it could even form a single coherent thought.
Which brings us to our first section, the amygdala hijack. This is what happens when fear completely bypasses reason.
So the term amygdala hijack was actually coined by psychologist Daniel Goleman. The crucial detail you need to understand here is what happens to your prefrontal cortex. That's the evolutionary masterpiece sitting right behind your forehead that handles all your rational thought, impulse control, and complex decision-making. When your amygdala detects a threat, it triggers this immediate, massive stress response. And during this hijack, the neural pathways to your prefrontal cortex are literally bypassed. The connection is just severed. The thinking part of your brain completely goes dark.
So you've got your rational brain, which is disconnected, overruled, and honestly, fundamentally too slow to keep you alive in a sudden crisis. On the flip side, you have the amygdala, which is immediate, controlling, and highly reactive. Makes a lot of human behavior suddenly make sense, doesn't it? I mean, this is exactly why you might say incredibly hurtful things in a moment of blinding anger that you deeply regret an hour later. Or why you might freeze during an emergency, even when you logically know exactly what to do. It's why brilliant, highly intelligent people routinely do incredibly irrational things. In those moments, your intellect wasn't broken. It was just locked out of the control room.
So that brings us to a rather unsettling question. Were your fears chosen, or were they programmed? You probably think you know exactly what you're afraid of and why. But neuroscience suggests a much darker reality. Your deepest fears were not conscious, rational choices. They're biological programming installed directly into your nervous system, completely without your consent.
Let's look at section 2, fear conditioning. This is how trauma actually programs your brain.
Okay, so fear conditioning always starts with something completely harmless, a totally neutral stimulus. But then, a terrifying event happens at the exact same time. Your brain learns this fear in a fraction of a second. Next, your amygdala forcibly files that association away, forging a permanent biological link. Basically, you experience something deeply frightening just once, and your brain decides, okay, we're going to permanently link this neutral thing to that terror to make sure we never, ever experience it again.
Let's make this a bit more visceral. That neutral stimulus, it could be the smell of a hospital. It could be the sound of a door slamming down the hall. Or it could be a very specific, slightly elevated tone of voice. This is exactly why a fully grown, highly capable adult can suddenly feel like a helpless, terrified child simply because someone used a particular cadence when speaking to them. Their brain learned the fear in a single moment decades ago, and it's been aggressively protecting them from that moment ever since, whether they still need protecting or not. Sure, the trigger might seem completely irrational to the outside world, but to the amygdala, it's a perfectly logical survival mechanism.
Moving on to section 3, fight, flight, and freeze. We're talking about the misunderstood third response.
Now, we need to talk about how this ancient system reacts once the alarm is fully pulled. When the amygdala calculates in a fraction of a millisecond that fighting will get you killed and fleeing is utterly impossible, it initiates the freeze response. It's a chilling physiological shutdown. Your heart rate drops significantly. Your muscles, instead of tensing up for action, go entirely slack. The person becomes completely still, silent, and oftentimes psychologically disassociated from their own body. Essentially, your brain has just pulled the plug.
And I want to make something absolutely clear here, which is perfectly highlighted by this quote. This response is not weakness. It is the oldest survival mechanism. You see, a lot of trauma survivors carry this immense, crushing guilt. They believe they should have fought back, they should have screamed, they should have run away. But freezing, that's an ancient animal kingdom tactic. It's playing dead when a predator just can't be outrun or defeated. If you froze during a traumatic event, listen to me, it wasn't a failure of courage. Your brain made a rapid, ruthless calculation that shutting down gave you the highest statistical probability of surviving the next 5 minutes. And since you're here today, watching this, your brain was absolutely right.
Let's shift gears to Section 4, the grand manipulation. The subtitle here is Social Control. So let's pan out for a second. We're moving from the microscopic pathways of the individual brain out to the macroscopic level of human society. Look at the resulting behaviors when a population's state is highly afraid. Frightened people actively seek out authority, strong leadership, and absolute certainty. They will willingly surrender their individual rights, their privacy, and their freedoms, all in exchange for the illusion of safety. They completely lose their tolerance for ambiguity or nuanced debate. They just demand simple, black and white answers. A frightened population is, by definition, a controllable population. And look, this isn't some wild conspiracy theory. It's an objectively observable sociological phenomenon that we've seen repeated all throughout history.
And that leads us to one of the most sobering insights in this entire explainer. For governments, institutions, or media structures to actually utilize fear as a tool of social control, the formula has to be incredibly precise. The threat must be real enough to believe, but vague enough to never be fully resolved. Because think about it, if a threat is definitively defeated, the fear dissipates and the control vanishes. By maintaining a constant, low-level, unresolved state of societal anxiety, the amygdalas of millions of people remain engaged. It effectively bypasses the collective rational brain of an entire society.
Which brings us to our final section, Section 5, Overcoming Fear. And yes, this is backed by neuroscience.
The good news here is that we don't have to remain victims to our biology. The exact same mechanisms that programmed your amygdala in the first place, they can be used to rewire it. The absolute gold standard for this is exposure therapy. That's repeatedly presenting the feared stimulus without the anticipated catastrophic consequence. If your brain learned fear through association, it can learn safety through new associations. By safely, gradually exposing yourself to the trigger and critically surviving it without that terrible result happening, you are actively forcing your amygdala to update its outdated threat assessment data. Over time, those biological alarm bells simply begin to quiet down.
But there's also an immediate, incredibly accessible neurological hack you can use right now, literally today. Naming the fear turns down the alarm. Brain imaging actually shows that simply stating the words, "I am afraid," or labeling the specific emotion you're feeling out loud actively engages your prefrontal cortex. By forcing your brain to find language for the feeling, you're literally forcing the rational brain back online. And that measurably and immediately reduces the activity in your amygdala. You aren't suppressing the fear, you're chemically diluting it with logic. So, what you should really take away from all of this is that fear is not your enemy. Your amygdala isn't some flaw in your design. Honestly, it's the most ancient, highly evolved protection system in your entire body. It was refined over millions of years of brutal evolution just to keep your ancestors alive long enough to create you.
The problem is simply that today's dangers are largely psychological, social, and abstract, rather than, physical predators hiding in the brush. Understanding this dark machinery in your mind, recognizing an amygdala hijack when it happens, and knowing exactly how to bring your prefrontal cortex back online, well, that is the difference between being controlled by your biology and actually using it.
The human mind is a fascinating, sometimes dangerous place, and there is so much more hidden programming left to uncover. If you want to continue exposing the ancient machinery quietly running your mind, make sure to subscribe to Dark Archive. We open a new file on forbidden psychology and buried truths every single week. The archive is open. But before you go, I want you to ask yourself something. The next time you feel a sudden surge of panic, who is actually in control? Is it you? Or is it the almond-sized dictator in your mind? See you next time.